I huddled in the darkest part of the closet, afraid to breathe for fear of making a sound, trying to figure out how I'd gotten myself into this mess. It started out like any other fall night, nothing special, just another Thursday night. The starter on my old Pontiac was on the fritz, so I caught a ride to the Wayside Inn. It was on the other side of town, but Thursday is ladies' night, so I felt compelled to make an appearance. It turned out to be a slow night, nothing much of interest, and I wasn't what the ladies in attendance were looking for. I ran into Charlie Brooks and a couple of his buddies. We shot some pool and told each other the lies we had hoped would impress the pants off of some member of the softer gender. Around midnight, I'd heard enough bull and was about to get a cab and call it a night. Before I could make the call, Charlie caught me and said he'd heard about a house party not too far from the bar. I really wasn't ready to go to bed, so I hopped into the car with the rest of his posse. The 5 of us piled out of Charlie's Toyota in front of a small frame house that had seen better days. The place was a mess. There were 2 cars up on blocks, an old washing machine, and who knows what else hidden in the overgrown grass that was taking over the front yard. Inside we found 2 guys passed out in the living room and a bunch of empty bottles and cans, the headstones of a dead party. Billy, who I learned later lived there, was in the backyard making out with his girl, Wendy, on a porch swing. Some fast food fried tacos I ate earlier in the evening were suddenly trying to make a curtain call, so I quickly went in search for the John. The bathroom's motif matched the rest of the house, modern filth. It was obvious we wouldn't be staying, and I thought about trying to hold off until I got home. The tacos and my intestines had a different idea. The tacos were grumbling like kids on the last day of school, not wanting to be there, and my intestines were like their parents, trying to get them out of the house as soon as possible. I had to yield to their opinion, and like a brave soldier or a fool, I rushed in before my internal organs could stage a revolt. I can't explain exactly how nasty the bathroom was because I'm trying to erase the memory from my mind. The fact that I had second thoughts about relieving the agony I was feeling should paint a clear enough picture. I only touched what I needed to finish the job and was out of there in what I considered record time. But, as I exited the restroom, I noticed the house was unexpectedly quiet. It turned out Charlie and his boys, finding the party was over, had taken off without me. I went out and talked to Billy and Wendy. They told me that Charlie had asked them if they had seen me, which they hadn't, so he figured I must have started walking back to the bar. I inquired about a lift home. They said they didn't have any wheels, but the Wayside was within walking distance and I could probably get a ride there. I should have called a cab, but in the state of mind I was in, I figured I could save some money, hoof it, and still get back to the bar before closing time. I'd lived in Lindsayville for most of my 26 years, but had never been in this part of town. It was the oldest part of the city, littered with large old Victorian houses mostly in need of a facelift. Consequently, I somehow got turned around and didn't realize it until I noticed the houses were starting to thin out. As I did a U-turn, I saw that one of the houses I'd just passed had the lights on and I could see some people milling around on the screened-in porch. I'd been trying to get my bearings and they weren't making any noise, so I must have missed it. Good thing I turned around when I did, or I might have missed it altogether. Maybe my luck was changing, maybe I could use their phone and call a cab, like I should have done instead of wandering off in unfamiliar territory. To my pleasant surprise, the figures on the porch were a couple of nice-looking ladies, who appeared to be my age or younger. They turned out to be sisters, Mary, the older of the 2, and Beth, the cuter of the 2. They were a bit standoffish at first. In this neighborhood, at this time of night, anyone would be. After hearing my dilemma and my assurance that I was not a whacked-out serial killer, they seemed to relax a bit. Mary said I could use the phone, and Beth added that these autumn nights get chilly, so it would be all right for me to wait for my ride inside where it was warmer. I found both of them attractive in an old-fashioned, girl-next-door sort of way. So once inside, I wasn't in any hurry to call the cab company. When neither of them brought up the subject, I figured they were thinking likewise. It turned out their mom was out of town, helping her sister with a difficult pregnancy, and their father was a long-haul trucker, scheduled to be home sometime the following afternoon. As such, the young ladies were letting their hair down, drinking some wine, and enjoying the brief respite of freedom from parental authority they had left. They didn't come out and say it, but I got the feeling that their old man wasn't a proponent of the Ozzie Nelson school of parenting. It was what they didn't say that made it appear they were somewhat afraid of him. We got to talking, I had some wine, and replaced calling the cab with a new idea that involved helping these two lovelies celebrate the few precious hours of unfettered living they so needed. I made sure their glasses were always half full and talked them into joining me in a bit of cannabis that Billy had given me to help me deal with the situation I was in. Both of them were bright and easy to talk to, which made for stimulating conversation. Before I knew it, a couple of hours had passed and it was going on 3 a.m. It appeared my plan was starting to come together. The wine and the weed had done their part by loosening up Mary and Beth's inhibitions. We were sitting on the couch, me in the middle with the sisters competing for my attention. It was starting to resemble one of my fantasies, and I couldn't wait to see how this would turn out. I felt like a rock star, a boy toy for a couple of groupies. Beth's head was resting on my shoulder and Mary was drawing little circles on my thigh with her finger, trying to explain something about something that happened sometime earlier in the day, I think. The situation I found myself in had my mind in another place, so I really wasn't listening. The fire had died down to a soft glow, making the scene very romantic. I was about to make my move on Beth and see where it would lead, when there was a sudden roar of a diesel engine, the screeching of a truck coming to a stop, followed by the swoosh of air escaping from its brake lines. A dark chill filled the room and the girls leaped from the couch in a panic. It was their father, home early. They told me to hide in the hall closet while they tried to get him upstairs. Then sneak out when it got quiet. I got the feeling they had done this before. I told them we hadn't done anything, we were just talking. Why did I need to hide? That's when my suspicions about their father were confirmed, because they said he had an awful temper, especially when it came to boys, and there was no telling what he might do. That was good enough for me, and I hightailed it to the closet. I looked back to see the sisters scurrying about, cleaning up any evidence of our little party before the old man walked through the door. Just as I was shutting the door, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. My black jacket was hanging on the coat rack by the foyer like a black flag warning of impending danger. It was too late to say or do anything, the girls were too preoccupied to notice. I had a feeling this wasn't going to end well. Damn, I should have called a cab like I was going to do instead of listening to that little voice that stokes my male ego and seems to always get me in trouble. I had gone from walking on cloud 9 to stumbling into the darkest part of this closet in a matter of seconds. What am I going to do if he finds me in here? What am I going to say? Why didn't I call that cab? I heard him enter the room and the three of them talking, but couldn't make out what was being said. I thought or hoped that maybe there was a chance he wouldn't see my jacket and maybe this would all work out. I swore to any god that was listening, if he got me out of this I would turn my life around, or at least try, and start going to church, if only for the holy days. My prayer was broken by the sound of breaking glass followed by loud angry cursing. I heard the sound of footsteps running past the closet and up the stairs. The heavy boot steps of the father soon followed them. He was accusing his daughters of being ungrateful whores, worthless sluts, and he'd make them pay for their sinful ways. His boots sounded like a bass drum as he lumbered up the stairs after them. Then I heard him pounding on a door demanding to be let in. I figured this was as good a time as any to get out of there, and I slowly opened the door. From upstairs came the crunching of wood as the door yielded to the kicking of his work boots. Without looking back, I headed straight for the front door. I started to open it and remembered my jacket was still hanging on the rack. I turned to go back for it, took 2 steps, when a blood-curdling scream stopped me dead in my tracks. It froze me like a statue. The only thing that seemed to be working was the part of me that urinates. The next few minutes were a blur and I found myself running down the street faster than I knew was possible. Blocks later I slowed down to a jog because my lungs are burning and there was a stabbing pain in my side. I started to feel like a shameful coward for running out on Mary and Beth. I thought of going back, thought better of that idea and keep going, in what I hoped was the right direction. I told myself it was a family matter, the girls knew what could happen, and except for some normal testosterone-driven wishful thinking, I had done nothing that I should have to pay for in pain. I was trying to ease my conscience, but I wasn't doing a very good job of it. I finally found a phone booth next to a small neighborhood market. My first call was to the police. I told them I was out walking my dog when I heard a violent argument and the sound of things being broken coming from the house, adding that I thought there were 2 young ladies living there and they might be in need of some help. The officer asked my name and address, but I hung up the phone, not wanting to get any more involved than I am. Then I make the call I should have made hours ago. I call a cab. My hands were shaking so much I had trouble getting my front door open. I had to use both hands to hold the key steady, but I finally got it open and flopped down on the couch. The sun would be up soon, but I couldn't sleep. I was still somewhat upset with myself for running out on the girls like I did. I could have at least tried to defuse the situation, talk to the old man or something. There was an empty feeling inside me. I guess that's where my chivalry used to be. I tossed and turned for more than an hour before falling into a troubled sleep. I was awakened by a nightmare in which I had shrunk to the size of a small rodent and was being chased around a dream-styled room by a pair of gigantic heavy work boots. Besides killing the cat, curiosity can be a great motivator. I needed to know what happened. I needed to know that Mary and Beth were all right before I could feel good about myself again. So, I borrowed my neighbor's car and took off to see what I could find out. As I pulled up to where the house should have been, I knew there was something wrong. This place looked as if nobody had lived in it for years. This couldn't be the same house. So, I drove around for a while, but something kept drawing me back to the first house. I was so confused. I was sure this was the right place, but it's not the same house. I parked in front of the place and was trying to put things in order when I saw a mailman coming down the street pushing his cart. I stopped him and said I was looking for someone who I thought lived there. He told me I must be mistaken because this place was deserted when he took over the route 12 years ago. As he tells me this, I'm thinking, what's going on, because I was sure it hadn't been a dream and I knew I wasn't so stoned that I had hallucinated the whole thing. He goes on to say I must have it mixed up with another house because no one has lived here since the murders. Hearing this, I got goosebumps all over and every hair on my body stood up at attention. He tells me the story of a crazy old man who killed his 2 daughters and then himself. The wife had been out of town when it happened and never came back. She couldn't sell the place and so it sits there slowly rotting away. He says the people in the neighborhood avoid it like the plague. He turns to continue with his postal duties and over his shoulder he laughingly says, "Everyone thinks the place is haunted, if you believe in that sort of thing." My jaw dropped to my chest, I was stunned, my head started spinning, and I felt like I was going to pass out. I had to get out of there. I stumbled back to the car and drove around trying to make some sense of it all. In the back of my mind, I knew what I had to do and it scared the shit out of me. I had to go back, go inside, and see what was there. When I returned to the house, I didn't see anyone around and told myself this was it. I knew if I left I'd rethink this whole business and probably never come back, and for my own sanity I needed to see what was inside. The porch was shaky but it held up as I tried unsuccessfully to get a glimpse inside through the dirty windows. I got to the front door and reached for the knob with a hand that was shaking like a dashboard hula dancer on a bumpy road. To my surprise and dread, the door opened with a loud creaking sound. The light that came rushing in from the open door awakened the darkness. My eyes adjusted to the semi-dark room and I started to look around. There was a sense of familiarity. It looked like the same place. But how could that be? A sudden gust of wind caused the door to let out another loud squeak and I almost jumped out of my skin. I turned, to make sure it was just the wind and not someone coming up behind me, and saw something that stopped me cold. I couldn't catch my breath. It seemed like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I wanted to run, as far and as fast as possible, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I looked again to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me in the dimly lit room. They didn't. With all that had happened, I had forgotten about it, but there, hanging on the coat rack, was my black jacket.